Today we're going to turn this into this. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today I'm going to take this piece of mulberry, which I got from my brother Aaron, thank you Aaron, and I'm going to turn it into a really cool, small, twice turned and ebonized bowl. And I'm going to show you the entire process, so stay tuned with me and see exactly how I do this. Now I'm going to be twice turning it so that I maintain a nice round rim. If I once turn it, this is slightly green, it still has some moisture in it. If I turn it just once thin, it's going to contract. The pith ends, the ends with the pith in them are going to push out and the sides are going to pull in, and I'm going to have more of an oval versus a really nice round shape. So in the middle of this process, I'm going to take a break and microwave dry this. I'm going to put it back on the lathe, turn it the second time so it stays true and round, and then I'm going to ebonize the exterior and we'll see what we come up with. I really like this wood because it's got this kind of this cool yellow hue to it. It's just really nice. It's nice wood to turn. It's very graphic looking, and I love the green patterns in it. So let's go check this out and see how it goes. First thing we're going to need to do is take it over to the bandsaw and trim out a bowl blank. All right, so there's our blank. Now we can start to see the grain really nice on the end grain, how beautiful that's going to be. And I could also feel the moisture on this as well. The shavings or the dust coming from this is sticking together, which is a good indication there's lots of moisture in it still, and we'll be dealing with that. I'm going to be using a 4-spur drive chuck that sits in the Morris taper of the headstock to hold this piece in place. The advantage of this is it's going to easily let me adjust these points to center the blank as I'm turning. So let me get this mounted in here and we'll balance it out. What I'm looking for is a balanced rotation. I want the flat side that's cut to be relatively flat as well as far as the location on the rotation. I want this to be nice and true. But I'm also lining up the wood grain here too, and I want this grain pattern to be relatively centered on the piece. So that's the real advantage of using the spur chuck and the tailstock, because I can make minor adjustments and line up some of this grain the way I want prior to making the turn. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. The first tool that I'll be using is a 5/8 inch swept back bowl gouge. This bowl gouge is really good at removing large amounts of material quickly. The swept back profile is a profile that I like to turn. It's 55-degree bevel, and it has swept back wings that go about 1.5 times the diameter of the shaft. If you want to learn more about sharpening and shaping bowl gouges, be sure to check out my Tool Sharpening for Wood Bowl Turning e-course on my website. There's also a link in the description below. So let's go ahead and rough this out. I want to start the lathe off slow and make sure we've got a good connection and everything's secure. Make sure the rotation's looking good, and then I'll bring it up to speed. That looks pretty good. I've got a little bit of vibration in there, so I'm going to back the speed down just a touch, and as I shape this, it's going to become more true and I'll be able to speed it up just a bit. As we make these cuts, we want to recognize that our gouge is extending way too far over this tool rest, stop the lathe and move the tool rest up. I usually keep it about a ½ inch away or maybe a centimeter away from the exterior of the bowl, and that way I know that I've got the good support from the tool rest. So we're starting to get the shape of the bowl here. I still have plenty of bark, and I have plenty of bark on the base of this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the bark at the foot of this bowl, because that's obviously going to be in our way for making a tenon in that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that now. Now again, I'm just using push cuts and they're grain supported. So I'm going with the tip of the tool pointing in the direction that I'm cutting, and I'm riding the bevel, which means I'm lining up the bevel edge and making it parallel to where I want the shape of the bowl to be. Okay, and that's going to give me enough shape to get in position here. What I really want to do is I want to form the tenon at this point, because I want to be able to determine how much space I have at the bottom of the bowl, which is going to be consumed by the tenon and the shoulder. So let's go ahead and let's make those. I'm going to clear off a little bit of area on the bottom there. I'm going to use my ½ inch swept back bowl gouge, which is essentially just like the previous bowl gouge I was using, except a little bit smaller. It makes a little bit finer, more detailed cut. And I want to make sure that that bowl base where the tenon is going to be is nice and flat. And the way I check that is just run the bowl gouge up alongside of it, and you'll be able to see if it's concave or convex, or if it's flat like it is now, which is exactly what we want. And that tenon is going to be right here. Now, I show how to do this in my video of how to make a tenon. You might want to check out that video. It goes over all the details of that. So now let me shape the tenon cylinder. And now I'm making the shoulder area. I use and make a shoulder on top of the tenon or below the tenon so that I have extra space later, design-wise. I can use this area to shape the remaining foot of the bowl, but I can also use the shoulder and the tenon in case I mess up the interior and go too far down inside the bowl. So that's going to be our shoulder right here. I'm making a push cut to clean that up. I'll finish the tenon later, but now you can see that because I reduced the depth of this bowl blank, really the bottom of my bowl and the shape is going to be down here. So now I'm going to continue shaping the exterior of the bowl using this point as the reference to be the base of the bowl. That's also going to help me remove these bark areas. Okay, so I'm going to continuously, because this is green wood, I'm also continuously checking to make sure the tailstock is nice and tight. Now I'm going to readjust the tool rest so I've got plenty of support to make this curved cut. I'm going to go back to my 5/8 inch bowl gouge and remove the bulk of this material. Okay, another thing is that because we have the majority of this bowl shaped, I can speed up the lathe now and get a little bit faster or smoother churn because I can go faster. I also am looking here, I have to take off another 1/2 inch or so to get rid of this bark in this particular area. Okay, we're getting close. We're down to the cambium layer here and here. I really don't want that to be on the exterior of the bowl. Sometimes that's pretty cool design, but that's just going to be really fragile material. It's going to dry up and flake away. And as I'm starting to see the shape of that bowl, I also know that I want to make it curved more. It's kind of clunky looking. I want this to be more elegant and a continuous curve. So I'm going to actually pull up my base here a little bit more and then keep making that turn. I'm going to bring my tool rest in just a bit. I'm going to go to my smaller 1/2 inch bowl gouge here and become a little bit more refined. So right there is going to be my ending point for the base, and that's going to continue through as a nice curve. And now I'm going to make the curve of the bowl match that. This is a scraping cut. A scraping cut is just kind of a quick way to remove material, but a little bit more refined, and it also reaches into areas like I'm doing right now a little bit better. So watch the shoulder and the base of the bowl. There we go. Now it's helping to refine that shape just a bit more. Still have some cambium over here, so I'm going to reduce this just a touch. I'm leaving this top area alone because I know I've got a crack going on here in the pith. I may be taking that area down just a touch. Plus it's uneven. It's just going to keep tearing out if I go that way. So I'm going to keep refining this shape. I want it to be more elegant. I want it to come down to almost more of a point here. So let me keep making that shape. Okay, and now I'm leaving this shoulder here because I need the support when I have the 4-jaw chuck attached to that. I need to have good support at the base of the bowl. But this is all going to be removed at the end of the bowl. We're getting close. Now keep in mind we're roughing this out so that we can dry it, and then we're going to turn it again. So this doesn't have to be perfect on this turning, but it should be pretty close. Let's speed this up just a bit. Check my tailstock. Okay, so now that's looking good up here. I want to refine this bottom just a touch. All right. That's going to be good. Now what I need to do before I can flip it is I need to make the dovetail for the tenon. Okay, so some people ask, why don't I make the dovetail when I made the initial tenon here? And what I like to do is I like to be able to be flexible with this setup when I'm using the 4-spur chuck and the tailstock. And there also could be some vibrations that's introduced from making all of those major cuts. So what I like to do is put the dovetail on last. So I'm at the same rotation then, or the same position as the last few cuts I was making on the exterior of the bowl, so it should turn truer when I rotate it around in the chuck. So to get the dovetail on there, I use a detail spindle gouge. And I just make a simple push cut into the crotch of that cylinder to the shoulder. And I also clean off the shoulder, make sure it's nice and true. And actually the little indentation in the middle, if it's undercut a little bit, is fine. If it's proud, that's going to be a problem because it's going to interfere with the top of the jaws grabbing on properly. So this looks good here. Everything is set up. I'm going to get the 4-jaw chuck and reverse this. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a perfectly flush seat from the shoulder on top of the chuck, and the tenon does not sit down in the base of the chuck. So the only thing that's touching is the top of the jaws to the shoulder and the inside of the jaws to the tenon. It's the only parts that touch. Again, if you need more information about making a tenon, check out my video on how to make a perfect tenon. Okay, there's a lot of rough material up here, plus I also have just a portion of the pith area that's in here. I want to remove all that. So I'm going to make some push cuts across the face here to clean up this material and clean up the face of this bowl blank, and then get down beyond some of these cracks that may be a problem later. I can see a little bit of that pith area here, that darker wood, and I can see that there's already a little crack right there. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this just a touch more. Okay, so right now we have a shaped bowl blank, and we know that we're going to twice turn that. So when I core this, I want to leave the wall thickness about 1/10 of the total diameter. So I'm going to grab the tape measure, and it's about 8 inches. So if I were to make this 1/10 of that wall thickness, it's going to be about 8/10 of an inch. If I come in here just a little more than 3/4 of an inch, is going to be right about there. Let's go ahead and mark that on the full blank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to core out the material in the center of this bowl. And because I'm not really too concerned with the form or shape of it now because it's going to dry, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this out as quickly as I can just to get the material out and try to keep an even wall thickness of that 8/10 of an inch. Again, these are push cuts with the bevel pointing towards the cut. I've got the bowl gouge turned at about a 45-degree angle, rotated, and then the handles drop down at about a 45-degree angle as well. And if you need to learn more about that, check out my bowl turning or bowl gouge beginner's use video. There's a lot explained in there. Got a little too aggressive with the nub there. It's always good to remember that that center turns at a slower speed than the exterior. Now let me point out something here. Okay, I'm going to try to put the camera here and get in a position to make this cut. It's not easy, but I want you guys to see this angle. This is basically what I'm looking at right here. When you're hollowing out a bowl, to keep an even wall thickness, what you want to do, instead of looking in the end, it's really common to want to bend over and look from the end of the lathe into the bowl as you're hollowing it, but you have no idea what the thickness is. Instead, stand up straight and look down on the turning. As I make this turn, I'm basically looking, I can see the exterior of the bowl and I can see the general location of where the bowl gouge is cutting. It's also a big advantage of taking the time to make a really nice curved exterior, because that's a simple cut to do in the interior. You're going to basically make a rotating cut with the bowl gouge on the inside anyway. If you have sides that go straight down and have almost a 90-degree angle, you've got to do a lot of maneuvering with this tool, and it just doesn't have a natural feel, and the look of it isn't quite as elegant as just a nice curved bowl. All right. So this is an ideal first turned, roughed out bowl blank that will work great as a twice turned piece. And as a matter of fact, I want to show you something. When you clear out the center, it's kind of like a straw. You ever played with straws when you were a kid and you pick up your drink? You put the straw in your drink, you put your thumb or your finger over the end of the straw and you lift it out and you lift out all that drink with it. Well, when you clear out the inside, it's kind of like releasing the straw. When you lift your finger off the straw, all that liquid comes out. Well, this is the moisture coming out of the wood grain because of the back of this being released. So the end grain, we have basically hollow straws. On the side grain, the straws are running this way. They're like this. So the end grain's coming here. Now the trick is we need to dry this before we turn it again. And as we dry it, this pith area is going to move out and these sides are going to pull in. But because we made this real wide, we will still be able to put it back on the lathe and turn a nice true circle. So guess what? We're going to dry this now, and I'm going to use a method with the microwave, and you're going to want to check this out. So let's go bring this in and microwave it. Okay, so I jumped in here and I've been microwaving this through short cycles of about 30 to 45 seconds. And over a couple days, this has become relatively dry. It's dry enough for us to go do our second turning and get a really nice, true round shape that will stay that way over time. If you want to learn more about microwave drying and drying in general, be sure to click the link up above for this other video I have on microwave drying, and check the description below because I've got a couple great articles on how to dry bowl blanks, and those go into a lot more detail. So check those out. And we're going to jump back on the lathe and get the twice turning started on this, and let's see what this thing turns out to look like. Okay, if you've seen my other twice turning video, then you've seen me use a faceplate like this, or a flat panel that's on a faceplate. The other one I have for larger bowls has a void in the middle, and that's designed to hold that raised pith area. After a bowl dries, usually the pith will raise. On some of the bigger bowls, it can be really dramatic, and it causes the bowl to be wobbly. This one has raised just a bit, but it's not horrible. So I'm going to use this simple one I have. It's flat, and it basically just has a piece of carpet backing or foam on it and a dedicated faceplate. And that's it. And this would be essentially a flat jam shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the center point where the tenon was attached, or where the tailstock was attached earlier, and line that up. Once that's lined up, I know that I'm going to have a good rotation. Now, keep in mind, this is turned to oval too. We know the perimeter of this is turned into an oval shape because of the drying process. and so has the tenon in the shoulder. So I'm going to true that up. Now, actually, before I get to that, I want to show you guys something. This shape of the bowl, take a look at that, because this is our next most important thing. I want to, this is a rough shape. I want to create a really nice, elegant form here. So I'm going to spend my time making this exterior just right. And I'm also going to use a smaller 4-jaw chuck down here. I had a 4-inch, and I'm going to use the my 2-inch jaw chuck here, a 4-jaw chuck, so that I have a smaller grip and I can work the foot. Now, the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to shellac the entire exterior. I'm going to finish the entire exterior, sand it, shellac it, and then I'm going to ebonize it. And I need to shape the side of the bowl and the outside of the foot before I can do that. So I'm going to take this down, because this, right now, I don't want the bowl to have this great big clunky foot on it. So that's going to be part of what I'm doing right now. I'm going to spend the time to really shape this bowl to exactly what I'm looking for. Let's take a look at that. Okay. It's centered. Now again, we got that wobble in it, so it doesn't look like it initially, but it'll be centered up here in just a moment. The remainder of the turning that I'm going to do, I'm going to be using my main 1/2-inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And this will be able to, this gouge will be able to handle all of the moves we need to make here for cleaning up this bowl and finishing the exterior. Remember, the shoulder here is really extra for me right now, and I'm reducing the size of this tenon. I'll clean up the face here. Then I'm going to use my dividers to mark the new tenon. Okay, because I'm in this end-to-end configuration, I don't want to make a lot of dramatic side cuts because I could be dislodging this. Instead, I'm going to use a push cut into the headstock. It's a little bit safer that way. All right, and now I'm going to reestablish the shoulder underneath this new tenon. The area that I'm working on right now is going to become the outside of the foot, so I want to be careful with what I'm doing here and start looking at the overall shape. I'm stepping aside and I'm looking at the top edge of this, and from your point of view, this top edge here, and getting an idea of what that shape could look like. I have to use my detail spindle gouge for the dovetail, and I'm also going to use that to shape the foot here as well. Just making a slightly indented angled cut to accommodate the angle of the jaws for the 4-jaw chuck. And I'm going to undercut this lower inside corner just so that we don't have any interference there. Now I'm going to look at the shoulder of the foot. Right now it's coming out straight, like a straight cylinder. I want to cut that back in just a bit. You give it just a bit of angle there. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so what I'm going to be turning here is primarily the foot area and the bottom of the bowl up to maybe the side of the profile. And at that point, I'll go ahead and mount it back in the chuck and I'll work it from the other side. But the exterior has to be perfect first before we can do the inside, especially when we're doing a thin bowl.
just a touch of a pull cut, only because I can't get in there and get on the bevel very easily. I'm going to try to turn around here and get on bevel so that I can get a good bevel riding cut across the surface here, a push cut. Okay, I don't want to hit that padding on our jam chuck. It sounded pretty good. It is good. I was hoping, I just wanted to take off enough to even out the exterior, so I was cutting off the high spots and basically just shaving right across the low spots. I've got a little bit of cleanup here on the base, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to use the shear scrape to do that. I'll do that now. You can see how dry that wood is now and how fine those shavings are. Okay, I really like that shape. It's very simple, it's got a nice curve to it. I'm gonna go ahead and reverse this, put it in the 4-jaw chuck, finish cleaning up that outside, and we're gonna true it again on the chuck, because if this wobbles at all and I'm doing this a thin wall, then it's gonna be off. So I'm gonna put it on the chuck and see how we do with that. All right, let's see how true this is turning. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to do some more shear scraping on this side and get this curve, and then I'm going to get that tip taken care of as well. The first cut I'm going to do is to clean up that rim. It's going to be a simple push cut. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to take the time to do some shear scraping and clean up this exterior and really make it nice and smooth so that we can get our finish applied. Actually, before that, I'm going to come up here and clean up this rim because the pith areas are higher than the other parts, and I don't want that to be interfering with what I'm doing in the other cuts. So you can see the wobble there. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up right now. Just a simple push cut. All right. Okay, so now the rim's squared up. Let's go back to this, and I'm going to do the shear scraping and get the exterior nice and fine-tuned. Okay, that's looking really good. It's exactly what I'd like to see, and now I'm going to sand this up and get it ready for a quick layer of thin shellac. And there's a good chance if I ebonize this right up to the rim that I'm going to get some on top of that rim. well, keeping it in the chuck and keeping everything nice and balanced, I can come back here and just trim off anything that gets on the rim and start hollowing out the inside once we're done with the ebonizing on the outside. So I'm going to sand this now. And just to show you what I'll be doing, I'm using a 3-inch foam sanding disc or pad on a angle grinder. And I'm going to be going through 120, 180, 240, 220. Oh, that's interesting. 240. I've got 240 and then 320 grits until I get a nice smooth finish here. And I'm not going to bore you with that part because you guys have seen that before, although I am going to do a video all about sanding that'll be coming out in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm going to put a layer of shellac on the exterior of this bowl first. Why would I want to do that? Well, the reason for doing that is to prevent the we're going to use black Indian ink as our ebonizing for this particular bowl. I know it's going to give me a nice jet black finish and it's going to look gorgeous. The problem is the end grain, again, are like straws and they soak up liquid. I've done this in the past and I've applied the Indian ink to the wood raw and it soaks right through and pops out the other side. And once it's done that, it's going through the whole fibers of the wood. There's no way to get it out. So the way you do that is you prevent it from going through the holes, and I'm going to use a layer of shellac on this first, and I'll sand it back a bit, and then we'll apply the Indian ink. If you want to learn how to make your own shellac, go check out my other video on how to make your own shellac. And as you're seeing right here, it's not just for finishing. This technically is for finishing the wood, but it's also really more for as a tool. The tool that I'm using it for right now is to seal up the end grain fibers so they don't soak up the ink and create an effect that I really don't want for this bowl. Instead, they're going to create a nice coat that the ink will sit on beautifully, and it's going to look great. This is a 1 pound cut, meaning I only made a cup of this particular shellac, but essentially there's the equivalent of 1 pound of shellac flakes per 1 gallon of alcohol. So again, check out that video. It's in my sequence, how to make shellac. All right, this dries pretty quickly. I'm going to turn the lathe on slow and we'll let this dry. You get it going too fast and you're going to have nice spatter marks all over. All right, the shellac on the exterior is nice and dry, and I quickly sanded it with 320 grit sandpaper to take off any kind of high spots or any imperfections. And that's also a great technique for preparing a surface for lacquer. As you can see here, I'm putting on gloves because I'll tell you what, this Indian ink is amazing in how it sticks to everything. All right, the ink you want to use for ebonizing a bowl is Speedball Super Black. Don't use anything else. And there's a reason for this. The main reason is the fact that the vehicle that this is, or the binder that's used for this ink, is shellac. And shellac is actually a great natural product, and it won't fade. This particular ink has UV protection in it and things of that nature. It won't fade over time. This is the only one. It has archival qualities to it, and it's used for fine artwork. So Speedball Super Black. Now, if you notice there, I only put like a couple little drops in there. That's enough to paint a large space. You'd be surprised. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working from the interior out. I kind of just work aside. Sometimes this will fade a little bit and I'll go through and make a second coat, which is nothing wrong with that. I'm going to find a place where I can set this down and rotate this. I'll turn it this way. There we go. So I'm just going to kind of work across this and put a nice even coat. Try to keep a wet edge, and I'm also covering the side of that foot. I probably should have taped up my 4-jaw chuck just to keep it protected. It'll be all right for right now. And just work your way around and get a nice even coat. I'm just using a cheap art brush here. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And you're going to want to use rubbing alcohol to clean out this brush afterwards. This is interesting. I had somebody ask me if they made blue Indian ink,
and they got me into checking into it and figuring out exactly what is Indian ink. And essentially what Indian ink is shellac, which is the binding agent, and soot. It's literal soot, smoke, and I don't know where it's harvested from, but it's basically smoke soot and burnt material soot. That's why it stains so intensely and is so permanent. I'm sure there's other ingredients in this that allow for the UV protection in that. All right, so I'm going to kind of look through over this and look for wet areas where there's a little bit of thick spots. I don't want to thin those down just a little bit, and don't want them to get too thick on there. And I'm going to let this coat dry really well. Once this tacks up or it starts getting a little bit drier, I'm going to turn the lathe on slow so it's not puddling up on one area. All right, I think that's pretty good for now. I'm going to turn this all the way down and get the lathe going, and we'll let that dry. Okay, so this is dried. There's some thin areas in here, and what I'm going to do is just go back over it and do another coat. Same exact process. Start in one area, work your way around. It's going to be a little bit thinner this time. I'm not going to try to put quite as much on. Just need to make sure I'm covering up all those areas. Now there's several different ways to ebonize wood bowls. If you are interested, check out my video. I did a demo for our local turning club on a variety of different ways, and I have an article on several different ways to ebonize wood. Using Indian ink is just one of those ways, and it's actually a really fun technique, especially if you have kind of ordinary wood. Or if you have wood that contrasts really well. The yellowness of this mulberry is just really nice with the black of the Indian ink. It just gives it a really nice combination. So it's just a fun, different way of taking an ordinary bowl and stepping it up a couple notches. Try not to let that run too much. Again, there was only like 2 little drops in the bottom of this cup that I poured in from the bottle over there. That stuff goes a very long way. I will list the Indian ink in the description, a link to that. I try to do that on all my videos. If I've got different items that I'm using that are unique, I will put just a link in the descriptions to those items. You can check those out. So if you see anything on any of my videos that you might be interested in, just check out the description. There's usually a link in the description. All right, this is getting close. Again, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to buff it a little bit with a 4/0 steel wool, and that's going to help take down any high spots. But before I can do that, this has to dry thoroughly, so we're going to let that take place. Try to get this last little section here. And then after that, we're going to turn out the interior. All right, that's looking pretty good. Smooth out some of those higher spots. Now I'm going to be putting an oil finish over the entire bowl when I'm done, but for right now I need this to dry really well. Okay, so I'm going to turn that on low, and we'll let that dry, and we'll come back in just a bit. Okay, so the outside of the bowl is all ebonized. I don't want to go back out there and do anything. I don't want to shape it or anything, obviously, because it's going to take that off. Now what I'm going to do, and here's what I was talking about. You can see how the ink came across on the rim. I'm going to trim this rim down just a little bit. I'm going to work the rim shape across here first, and then I'm going to start working down into the bowl steps at a time. And as I go down, I'm not going to come back out. I'm just going to continue working down until I have the full shape of the bowl finished. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this rim set up. I'm closing the flute to 3 o'clock. I'm going to get my lathe speed up here. Now I want to check and make sure there's no visible ink on that edge. And it looks really good. I've got a nice crisp black edge coming right up to the wood, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an inside
cut that's going to start establishing the thickness of the wall. Now remember, the inside of this is not balanced because it was contracted. We've already trued up the exterior, but the inside has not been trued up. So we're going to hear a little bit of clicking in that from the different depths of wood. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm making sure that my tool is really sharp. I just went ahead and sharpened this bowl gouge. And again, this is my swept back 55-degree bevel bowl gouge. If you want to learn more about shaping your bowl gouge and sharpening them, be sure to check out my tool sharpening for wood bowl turning e-course on my website. There's a link down in the description as well. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping the bevel parallel with the exterior of the bowl. I'm looking from top down on this bowl. I'm not looking down into the center of the bowl. Instead, I'm looking down and I'm trying to line up the angle of this bevel with the exterior of the bowl so that they're parallel. Thinking that's going to be the thickness of the bowl right there. So now I'm going to remove some more material as I work down. It's kind of taking a step back and looking at this and trying to figure out if that's the thickness. I might go just a hair thinner than that. I'm going to remove a little bit more material below that, and I'm going to make one pass from top to bottom. Bring the speed up just a bit, and I'm going to make, this will be my finished thickness, wall thickness right here. The best calipers you have are your hands. Take your index finger and your thumb and determine the thickness all the way down. This feels nice and even all the way to about right here, and it starts getting a little bit thicker right here, which is fine because that's what I would expect at this point. So that's going to be our wall thickness. I'm going to continue working through the base of the bowl. If you've heard of the ABCs of wood bowl turning or of wood turning, you may want to check out my video called the AHBCs of wood bowl turning. That's what I'm using right here. Is I'm letting the heel touch, and then I'm picking up my cut, and then I'm proceeding. And when you're doing this and you want to keep it really precise, stop frequently and use those super precise calipers right there, and you can see exactly where you need to be making more cuts or a little bit more refinements. Okay, that's feeling really good. I'm going to continue down into the bowl. I'm going to switch out for my curved tool rest. If you want to learn more about tool rests, check out my tool rest video. And these are robust tool rests, and they are just fantastic for doing this type of work. Just in general, because they're always where you want them and they don't slide around. That's my favorite part of them. All right, so I'm just going to keep working another inch or so.
That's feeling good right there. It's getting a little bit thicker. This is a really interesting opportunity here to show you this. If you see these lines, if you have grain lines going like this through your piece, there's a chance that if you've got tool marks or if there's a thick area or a thin area, like right here, there's an area it's really subtle. It can't be more than a 64th of an inch higher right here than it is here, but these grain lines will tell you that. Check that out. You see how they kind of move right there? Now, sometimes it's the pattern in the wood, but in this case, it's actually the cut. I'm just a little bit thick there. I can come back and try to fix that. Of course, it's getting really nitpicky, and that honestly, I'm not going to now that I think about it, because it's literally like a 64th of an inch if that. And if I go back and start fussing with it, there's a chance I'm going to go down deeper in another area. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue what I'm doing here and finish the base of this bowl. Okay, you want to make sure we keep that thickness all the way down, and it is getting thicker starting right here. So I'm going to make a couple more passes. See how that looks. All right, that feels really good. I need to drop the tool rest here now. You want the portion of the bowl gouge that's actually doing the cutting, which in this case is going to be the front right corner of the bowl gouge tip. You want that to be cutting right on the center line, especially when you get to the middle of the bowl. Okay, so I can see there that the space in the center of the bowl is relatively flat. I want this to curve and match the rest of the bowl, so it's got to be concave just a hair. So I'm going to pick up this cut out here, rub the heel, lift the handle, make bevel contact. You got to go really slow here because we don't want to pull out fibers. We want to make a cut here, not pulling out fibers. That's it. Now let's use the hands, calipers. That feels really good. Okay, I'm going to sand this out now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my favorite wood bowl finish, which is tried and true original. This is linseed oil and beeswax. Check out my video on that if you haven't seen it already. And application couldn't possibly be any simpler. Basically going to take this piece of old t-shirt that I have inside this jar, and I'm going to squeegee out all the excess. The amount that needs to be applied is very minimal. Now, one thing we do need to be aware of with this bowl, which is pretty special, is the fact that Indian ink is on the exterior of it still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply everything to the interior first and then apply the exterior. So if any comes off on my application cloth here, it won't get on the clean wood itself. So all we need to do is create a nice thin coat. If you can sense that there is oil on the wood, you have enough there. That's how the application process is described to me from the people that make this. And then what's going to happen is in an hour I'm going to come back and wipe off any excess, because you don't want any thick areas. If you've ever applied this and it's kind of turned tacky or sticky, it's because you've applied too much. So in an hour I'm going to come back and wipe off any excess, and then tomorrow I'm going to run this on the lathe with the 4/0 steel wool and burnish the finish after it's set for 24 hours. So there is the ebonized two-tone mulberry and black bowl. Very, very simple. Now, I haven't taken the tenon off this yet. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm leaving the tenon on there so that I can put it back on the lathe and burnish the finish before I turn that tenon off. But if you want to learn how to turn off a tenon, check out my video on tenon removal. You see that in my playlist. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm putting together some of these videos that are a little bit longer because they show a lot of different techniques that go together, such as the microwave drying, the twice turning, the ebonizing, the way I'm shaping these bowls, how I'm using different tenons and things of that nature. That's how I learned. I saw other people doing things like this, and I had a lot of aha moments, and it was nice. I mean, that's how I was able to pick up most of the things that I've learned. So let me know what you think about that. These longer videos, if they work for you, let me know. Leave me a comment below. I'd greatly appreciate that. I'm also making shorter format videos on specific topics because, again, I never saw that when I was learning. I never saw somebody showing specifically how to do some of the things with bowl gouges and other turning aspects like that. A lot of times the title said they would, but then you'd watch the video and they'd basically just turn a whole bowl, and it was kind of confusing as to what they were trying to teach. So let me know what you think of that. I've kind of got a mix. I've got more specific videos going on certain topics, and then I've got some longer format. I'm calling them start to finish videos where I'm showing you where I start from a piece of wood and turn it into a two-tone ebonized mulberry bowl, things of that nature. So let me know what you think of that. And like my video if you haven't already, if you do like it, of course. I mean, that's what I'm hoping you do. That's why I'm doing these videos. And if you're not already subscribing, please subscribe. I really need you to click that subscribe button and click the bell. And that way you're going to get informed as soon as a new video comes out, and I've got tons of great more videos coming out. So, as I always like to say when I finish these videos, until next time, happy turning.